last message of the Summer of Love series. Here we are. Where, I mean, some of you thought, how long have we been doing this? Well, actually, May 14th is when we started this series. And we continued. Now, we broke for Pentecost. That's the only time we really broke the series over the summer. I was away for 2 weeks, and then so we broke that particular part. But basically, we started it way back in the May 14th with leading with love to those who lead and live with us. That was the title of the first message. And as we looked at that, one of the great things, it was from 1 Thessalonians 15, 12, and 13. It says, "We urge you, brethren, to recognize those who labor among you and who are over you in the Lord, and admonish you, and to esteem them very highly in love for their work's sake, and be at peace among yourselves." And then we paraphrased that, and it read this way: "Seriously consider honoring those who work hard and exercise leadership in their close relationship with you in the Lord, and instruct you in your Christian behavior and conduct. And think of them in the highest regard in your love toward them for their work among you to keep peace with one another." Now, the question we asked in that first message was, what's love got to do with it? And we discovered really quickly that love determined everything that we do in our Christian walk. It determines everything about us. Love is our mission. And so we have this mission from God. Determining if it required our serious consideration and respecting that those who serve among us was the focus of what we were called to do by Paul in that passage, as he called the Thessalonians to do the same thing. From there, our summer love journey took us through 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8. And of course, 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8 defined what love was. And we discovered that particular message, as it's defined, that love bears up under the many irritations we face without complaint. And it shows mercy to those that irritate them, looking beyond the circumstances and having kind compassion for them as individuals. That particular message, we talked about people being on our last nerve, if you'll remember. And of course, it talks about love does not entertain negative feelings over the success or achievement of others. Love does not excel at playing the windbag to draw attention to themselves, does not entertain ideas of self-importance so they see themselves as the most important person in the room to the detriment of others. It doesn't celebrate injustice in any form, but celebrates the justice that comes through the gospel of faith and the transforming power it brings. Does not openly criticize the actions of others, but prayerfully seeks God on their behalf, convinced that all things are possible in God, hoping for the fullness of the Spirit to bear fruit in them and others, and stands faithful no matter what they face. And this was 1 Corinthians 13, and this is what we went through. We went through that through a number of messages. And from there we end up where we're at today, the last portion of 1 Corinthians 16, 13, and 14, which was very short. Watch, stand fast in the faith, be brave, be strong, let all that you do be done with love. And as we paraphrase that, we see that it says, keep watch over the actions and reactions in your life. Stand securely in your convictions of faith and belief about what you practice. Be confident in acting the way you know is right. And set your mind toward the actions that agree with your faith. Let everything you do express your love toward God, yourself, and those around you. And as we look at that, we begin to see that each message focused toward the greatest and most important folks in the Bible, and that's our walk with God and walking in love. And we see that over and over. Some people thought that John 3:16 was the only love verse in the Bible. For God so loved the world. But really, God has a plan to help us to learn to love as we walk this walk of faith. There's never an expectation that you will do this or else. Now, again, I've shared with you about my rides in the back of our station wagon when I was a kid. And my dad was always, you guys stop that or else. And then the brakes would come on and he'd pick who we wanted, right? We know that. But that's not how God is. God does not say, do this or else. He actually calls us to learn how to do it. To love as he wants us to love. And so all the passages we've covered this summer, this last portion is really the most directive. Because it finishes up by saying, let everything be done in love. Or let everything that you do be done in love. And so we begin to see that there is something that God is directing us toward through the words of Paul. Encouraging our loving action on a personal level. And so really, if we think about it, we need to be loving God, ourselves, and others. That's what it means to have everything done in love. Because if we only do everything that's done in love towards God, we've heard this before, right? You can be so spiritually minded, you're no earthly good, right? So you can do that, and and yet John deals with it later in his epistle. What good is it if you love God and don't love your brother? I mean, these are all mentioned. Now we never even touched on the epistle of John, any one of the three, and we never touched on those. But each one of these connects in a lot of ways of what we've been doing. We've looked at the basics of what it means to walk in love. But let everything you do express your love toward God. That's an important beginning point. And as we look at this series, it says for us to love God and ourselves and others, we need to be guided by the love we've talked about. And our minds automatically go to Jesus when the Sadducees said to him, which is the greatest commandment? They're trying to catch him in the law at that time. And he says one very, very easily, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. So if we're to love God, that started in the 10 Commandments given on the Mount. Jesus reaffirmed it as he was here, and we see that the Scriptures reaffirm it as we've been going through our series this summer. See, the law failed in that nobody could love because I said so. That's what the law said. That's why they continued to have sacrifices and continued to have to go every year to the Mount so that they could give sacrifices at the temple. And it became quite a business. We know that Jesus turned over the tables in the temple because they were making quite a business out of it. They were selling all the sacrifices. They were doing everything they needed. Whatever you need, you come. You don't bring stuff from home. There was no sacrifice involved anymore. There was just simply commerce. And again, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with selling in church. Don't get me wrong. You can, if you want to sell books at the back, I'm okay with that. I don't have an issue with that. You want to, but if you're going to bring some cattle, and I was in Argentina, and they actually brought a lamb in for the slaughter. They took it in the kitchen, and it came out in small portions of food for the rest of the week. Yeah, we ate fresh meat that whole week. Now, if you're going to do that, I think there's some rules on that one. The health department may frown on it here. But the idea is that the reason that Jesus was talking about being a house of prayer is the attitude that people had to come with. They were supposed to bring their sacrifice from their own. What was the very first condemnation of a sacrifice was giving of plants versus giving of animals in the very beginning. So what happens? If we don't have a sacrifice that we bring with us, then that was wrong. So Jesus turned over the table and said that my house will be called a house of prayer. Now, when we come through all of that, we see that when we come to love, that sometimes there's a sacrifice involved because sometimes we have areas in our life we need to change. And if we need to change them towards our love for God, we need to learn what it is in order to show what that is. Basically what we're talking about here, if we're going to love God with all our hearts, instead of action, we need to do something in order to show love. We become something that allows His love to flow from us and through us, and not simply by doing to prove. There's different. When things flow through you and to others, it becomes a natural expression. But when you are going to say, well, I'm going to show love today, then what happens is it can get very sticky. It can get very difficult. So how do I show love to someone if I don't know how to love? I need to love God so that His love flows through me without me having to create some type of interpretation of what that looks like. Because with my interpretation comes rules that you need to live by. You ever had that where people have tried to love others and they say, well, they can't be loved. They won't let me love them. Well, that's your interpretation. If you allow God's love to flow through you, you don't have to have a response that proves that they'll take your love. It will automatically flow to them, and it will create and build. We've said this all through our series. You need to build these type of things. It's not something that happens. And as it flows through you, people begin to get an impression of, you know what? This person loves God. This person is this way. And they begin to trust you, and they begin to receive love from you. One of the greatest things about being in the role that I'm in right now is that I get a chance to talk to people from all over the world. And when I talk to them as a person. I'm not even when I send them an email, I unless it's an official email where part of my role, my emails all end with Doug. I don't put Dr. Doug, blah 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 blah. I don't put all that down. And when I talk to them, I don't have them sit across a desk. We sit beside each other. I'm here, they're there. We have an open conversation. And one of the things about international students that I've found out very clearly is if you don't put barriers between you and them, that they actually trust you. And they receive what you say, and they actually will let you love them as people. Otherwise, if there's barriers, if they sit across the desk, then I'm the professor, and they're the less than student. If I create a barrier by putting my titles down all the time, then I am the greater educated and they're the lesser educated. But in order to love them, I need to be who I am, because God did not save Dr. Doug Atha. I don't know if you knew that or not. He saved Doug, the drug addict. So we know that he does these works, and so I have to love him. I have to love God to let him, with everything I do, everything I am, all my thoughts, all my thinking, so that all my praise and thanksgiving for his goodness and kindness and grace toward me, even to the stabbing thoughts of unbelief and uncertainty that I have. Anybody have any stabbing thoughts of unbelief and uncertainty sometimes? Happens. Yet that's still how we're to love God. Because in the midst of it, if you love him, you have faith in him, you trust him to get you through that. That uncertainty is momentary versus a life sentence. As we said, most people are having real trouble with self-esteem and mental health right now. But if you know one thing, if you know that God loves you, even in your uncertainties, even in your doubts and your fears, that he is going to be with you, then your love is actually purest because it doesn't waver because of your circumstances. Don't get me wrong, the circumstances are tough. Sometimes you can feel like the end of the world. But when we love God, we say, God, this is how I feel right now. I need you to know I still love you. With all that I am. Even if I feel diminished right now, I love you. I may not feel like I'm on top of the world, but I do know that you are. And I don't have to think about it. You see, God calls us to love him through our innermost being, so that we are fully engaged in every part of our journey with him. Every part. What do you call someone who's only with you during the good times? A user?
Fair weather friend.
Fair weather friend, right? God is not a fair weather friend. God sticks with you and stands with you in every situation of your life. He's always been there. In the Old Testament, he said he sticks closer than a brother. Now, some of you, I realize, you'd rather have your brother stick a little farther away, but that's fine. But the idea is that God is there through every situation. And that's his plan for us. That he becomes our comfort and our place of rest. There's no better place to rest than in God when you are having a difficult time. And you can just wash up on the beach of his love, so to speak, and lay there. Not able to move forward, not wanting to go back into the water, but just resting there, letting him minister to you, love you. One of the songs I was going to pick for this morning, I didn't, and I'm only mentioning it because it was this thought in my notes that I really wanted us to go with, is the Father's Song by Matt Redman, and how he sings the Father's Song. The Father's Song is sung over us. And it's sung over us because he loves us. Now, again, the same idea. We love him so that he loves us in every part of our journey.